Apologize to my sister or get out of my house. My husband Ethan said it loudly enough that everyone at the dinner table stopped eating. For a few seconds, nobody moved. I could hear the faint clink of a fork against a plate somewhere beside me. Claire, Ethan's younger sister, slowly lifted her wine glass and took a sip. And then she smiled. That smile told me everything. I looked at Ethan. Your house? He stared at me like I was the one being unreasonable.
Yes, Lily. My house. And my family. Something inside me went strangely quiet. Not broken, not angry, just quiet. I reached down and picked up my handbag. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Good. Maybe you'll finally learn when to stop arguing. But I didn't walk toward the front door. I walked toward the hallway. And 3 minutes later, I came back carrying a locked manila folder. Ethan's expression changed.
Because what he didn't know was that 3 weeks earlier, I had stopped being afraid of losing my marriage, and tonight, I had brought the proof. It had started with something small. Claire had been talking about my job during dinner. You know, she said, cutting into her food, it's sweet that Lily still tries so hard with her career. I looked up. Tries? Claire shrugged. I just mean, not everyone can balance a real job and a family. I almost laughed. Almost. I had just been promoted 2 weeks earlier. I was working longer hours, yes, but I had never stopped helping at home. I think I'm managing, I said. Claire smiled. Well, Ethan doesn't complain. I looked at my husband. Instead of defending me, he sighed. Lily, you're overreacting again. Again. That word hit harder than Claire's insult. Because it wasn't about dinner. It was about every conversation I'd had with Ethan during the past few years, where my feelings somehow became the problem. I remembered Claire borrowing my car without asking. Ethan had told me, she's family. I remembered questioning a strange withdrawal from our joint account. Don't make everything about money, he'd said.
And I remembered how often I had apologized simply because I was tired of arguing. But tonight was different. Tonight he had humiliated me in front of everyone and then told me to leave my own home. The folder in my hand suddenly felt heavier than it actually was. I placed it on the table. Claire's smile disappeared. Ethan frowned. What is that? Something you should have seen before you told me to get out. I opened the folder. The first document was the deed to the house. I slid it across the table. Ethan looked at it. Then at me. What are you doing? You called this your house. I tapped the document. It isn't. Claire leaned forward. Ethan picked up the deed. His face changed almost immediately. This doesn't prove anything. It proves ownership. He stared at me. The house had belonged to me before we were married. My mother had left it to me. I had never hidden that from Ethan. In fact, when we first married, he used to tell people how much he admired my independence. You're lucky, he'd once told me. Your mother gave you a head start. Back then, I believed he meant it. Over time, though, things changed. First, Ethan offered to help with the bills. Then he started managing the accounts. Then Claire needed somewhere to stay. 6 months, Ethan promised. She stayed for 2 years. Every time I brought it up, I was told the same thing. She's family. But family wasn't supposed to make you feel like a guest in your own house. I learned that slowly and painfully. The second document I placed on the table was a bank statement. Ethan looked at it. Claire looked away. $5,000 transferred from her joint account to Claire. I looked directly at Ethan. You remember this? His jaw tightened. Lily, we already talked about that. No, you talked. I listened. Claire interrupted. I needed help with my business. And I would have understood, I said, if anyone had asked me. Ethan shook his head. You would have said no. That sentence hurt more than I expected.
Not because he was accusing me of being selfish, because he knew exactly how to make me question myself. Maybe I had been too strict. Maybe I should have helped. Maybe marriage meant letting things go. That's what I had told myself for years. But then I checked the statements.
There wasn't just one transfer. There were several. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. And the $5,000 wasn't the worst part. It was simply the moment I finally started paying attention. I began saving copies of everything: bank statements, messages, emails, anything that involved money, the house, or Claire. I didn't confront Ethan immediately. I wasn't trying to trap him. I just needed to know whether I was imagining things. Then, 3 weeks before that dinner, I received an email about my property. At first, I thought it was routine. Then I saw a reference to refinancing. My stomach dropped. I started looking. And what I found made my hands shake. Ethan and Claire had been discussing ways to use the equity in my house to help Claire's struggling business. My house. The house my mother left me. The house Ethan had just ordered me to leave. I sat at my desk that night for almost an hour, staring at the screen. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I think something inside me had already cried enough. So I called a lawyer, quietly. I asked questions. I showed the documents. And for the first time in years, I made a decision without asking Ethan what he thought. Back at the dinner table, Ethan was still holding the deed. "You're making this sound much worse than it is." "No," I said. "I'm finally describing it accurately." I placed the refinance correspondence beside the bank statement. Claire immediately reached for it. I pulled it back. "Don't." She froze. "Lily, you don't understand." "Then explain it." Nobody spoke. Ethan rubbed his forehead. Those conversations were preliminary. About my house. We were trying to help Claire. Using my property? He didn't answer. One of the relatives sitting across the table finally spoke. "Ethan, did you know Lily owned the house before you married?" Ethan looked irritated. "Of course I knew." "Then why did you call it yours?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Claire suddenly looked at him. "You told me she would never find out." The room went completely silent. Claire's eyes widened. She realized what she'd just said. Ethan turned toward her. "Claire..." But it was too late. I didn't even feel satisfied. That surprised me. I had imagined this moment so many times. I thought I'd feel powerful. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of explaining. Tired of being the only person in the marriage who seemed to understand that marriage required respect. Ethan's voice softened. "Lily, listen to me." I did. He stood. "We're married. You really want to destroy our family over this?" I looked at him. "You didn't protect our marriage tonight." He looked confused. "You used it as a weapon." His face fell. For once, he had nothing to say. Then he tried one final thing. He became emotional. "I made mistakes," he said, "but you're really going to throw everything away?" I looked around the room, at the people who had watched me apologize over and over. At Claire, who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. At Ethan, who had spent years telling me that keeping the peace was more important than being right. I took a breath. "You keep calling this throwing everything away?" I picked up the deed. "But I've been carrying this marriage for years." Ethan whispered. "So what happens now?" I looked at him. Now you leave. He laughed nervously. You're bluffing. No. I took my phone from my bag. I spoke to an attorney 3 weeks ago. His smile disappeared. I've already documented the transfers, the communications, and everything connected to the property. Claire stood. Lily, where are we supposed to go? I looked at her. That isn't my problem anymore. Ethan stared at me. You're really ending this? I shook my head. You ended it long before tonight. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't need to. The truth had already done the shouting for me. Ethan and Claire eventually left. Not dramatically. No screaming in the driveway. No broken glasses.
Just two people carrying bags through the front door of a house they had somehow convinced themselves belonged to them. Ethan stopped before leaving. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he said quietly, "You'll regret this." I looked at the doorway, then at the house around me. The walls my mother had painted. The old wooden table where she used to drink tea. The hallway where I had grown up. No, I said. I regret the years I spent thinking I needed your permission to belong here. He looked down. Then he walked away. The door closed. And for the first time in years, my house was quiet. I stood alone in the living room. I expected to feel devastated. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. That night, I finally understood something. The hardest part wasn't standing up to Ethan. It was believing I had the right to stand up at all. He told me to leave my house, so I stayed.